It is January 14th, 2016. I'm Alex Ansary, and this is another Outside the Box podcast. This is an impromptu podcast that I'm doing without notes. It's something that I feel passionate about. I felt passionate about this issue for many years, and I think that the time is right to put some of my abstract, outside the box ideas in one place and discuss women's self-defense. Not only with regards to physical training, but discussing how women's safety, women's self-defense does include things like being self-sufficient, being able to live outside of a city, being able to protect your mind and consciousness, also known as psychic protection, so you can make the right decisions. In particular, what makes a decent male protector or ally or friend versus what a lot of people pick voluntarily? So we're going to talk about self-responsibility for one's actions and choices with one's circles of friends. And you can see many examples on YouTube where we see jackasses putting their girlfriends in danger when they go out and provoke fights or get into a fight with a gang that didn't need to happen. Unfortunately, biology is such that this aggressive behavior that some men show women is seen as a sign of being an effective protector, and that is not necessarily the case. And so I'm going to be sharing with you my opinion, and I do believe that we are in some sort of an inverted reality of controlled biology and procreation, and only in a fallen world such as this can so many people, so many men and women, be misled by their own sexuality. So how does this relate to self-defense? Well, in a lot of ways a lot of people don't talk about. There's a lot of racial tensions that are absolutely manufactured by the control structure. And when you have people that are in a hysteria, or they think they're being invaded by one particular group that they think intends to do them harm, in some cases there's retaliation against women. Not to mention, as most of you should already know, there's been a lot of horrible things that have happened to women in Iraq and Afghanistan, not necessarily or only at the hands of men that live there, but at the hands of the occupiers. And so there's many stories of gang rape. And so what I want to say right now is rape is a big topic, especially with the allegations of the mass rapes, New Year's Eve mass rapes in Europe. There's also other information that suggests that they have mixed in some disinformation and other photographs to make what happened worse than it was. So in a realm such as this, with so much backwards thinking, there is allegations of racism where racism doesn't exist, and there isn't genuine concern about the racism that does exist. There's a lot of amplified fear that they put out there to terrify women, to create this false narrative that men are inherently rapists. So we've seen this rape culture meme, and we've seen the media exaggerate certain things to amp up that gender warfare and sense of distrust and resentment. These are the most unromantic times. I've said this for years. For many years, I mean, I've only been alive since 1980, but I think for many generations, this is the most unromantic time to be alive as a result of the digital mind control and the internet and how we have been separated from each other. So this actually creates a public safety, a women's safety issue when we are so divided and taught to fear each other and taught to have these outrageous expectations. In this day and age and in this culture, a lot of women look at the amount of money or social acceptability that a man has. And those very buttons that turn us off and turn us on, you know, the very things that we're drawn to, that people are drawn to, being that the brain is the largest sex organ in the human body. It's not the genitalia. The brain can be affected with mind control and a special blend of subversive programming and influence to where people will go after what is actually wrong for them or bad for them or no good for them. Many men chase women that aren't good for them because they're addicted to the sex and the pleasure that they have when they're with that woman on a physical level. So a lot of men and women that are trapped within the five sense reality and the fallen sexuality paradigm that most people don't admit that they're actually in. We have an epidemic of people picking the wrong partners. For the purpose of this conversation, we are talking about women's safety. And so when I talk about women's safety, it is a number of different things at once. And we'll talk about physical training, why off-the-grid living or having wilderness survival skills is important, why psychic protection is important. Most of all, to make the proper decisions in your life and not fall under some kind of a spell. But women, even women that don't necessarily see themselves as capable of being able to defend themselves, have certain abilities. And whether you're a male or a female when it comes to self-defense training, know what your strengths are. Know what your weaknesses are. I had a trainer who had a very different build than I. Heavy hitter, 200 and, he would range between 220 and 240. He was a power lifter. And so a lot of the training with, he was one of the best instructors that I had. A lot of it was hard hitting and punching, which works when you have that ability, when you're in shape. There's other ways of defending yourself that doesn't necessarily require brute strength and such power. And I actually posted on Facebook some of my thoughts that I'm sharing with you now in this podcast. And my friend Ashley said that she was thinking about taking Aikido, which I recommend. It's very important that women know how to defend themselves from full power punches by not matching brute strength with brute strength, but learning, being properly trained through drills. And there's a number of drills where you wear the proper protection and headgear and you simulate the real attack. And so if someone is well trained and they are able to understand the methods of, say, Aikido or even Wing Chun, from the parry, the deflection, Wing Chun was basically created for a female to defend herself against a man that was going to force her to marry him. This was actually in the legend of how Wing Chun was converted as a simple system from a more complex Kung Fu system. Aikido is a Japanese system that encompasses a lot of circular movements to deflect a lot of attacks, wrestling takedowns included, which a possible rape victim might encounter, someone trying to physically wrestle them to the ground. So this is where some MMA training comes into play. As far as striking, the human body is actually capable of generating great power and torque. It's more of a science than something about, brute strength or power, which is why you see smaller guys take out larger guys in some cases when they're toned and their muscles are in shape and they've done the conditioning and they know where to strike and they know how to strike. A lot of men and women, in my opinion, that are in self-defense courses don't learn the basics of proper striking. And if you strike correctly and condition your hand in gentle ways, from, punching on telephone books to sand. Of course, this is something that's going to be attractive to a female, but the palm strike is something that can be delivered without damaging the delicate bones in the hand. It is true that the hand can come under serious injury when hitting something hard. So when I was younger, 14 or 15, when I first started training, actually going back to 13, I would hit telephone books and things of that nature. And in some cases, I would hit the heavy bag for a limited amount of time to long amount of time, depending on how it felt. But I would do some bare knuckle training on the bag itself. So even for females, there's a light amount of conditioning that you can engage in without developing large calluses on your knuckles. A lot of things that come to mind with regards to female self-defense, other strikes, a knee to the groin, a claw, finger claw to the eyes. And so this podcast isn't going to demonstrate that. You can go on YouTube and you can watch also some women. They have their guy all padded up and they're screaming "Kia, Kia," as they're basically breaking down their attacker. I think what's most important though is that people learn what works for them, what they're good at, through trial and error and engaging in a number of different attack and defense drills. And there's a number of different drills that can be brought into your training program. And I am recommending a training program with regards to physical self-defense. You can get a few ideas off of video. It's really better to have a trainer, but there are ways that you can master, and it's really important to master the same defensive tactics, the same offensive tactics, and to practice those very techniques over and over and over again. I want to make one more point and then move on to the next part. I think it's called Taibo. It's a form of aerobic kickboxing. He's been in a number of movies with people like Bolo Young, who I've also been a fan of. He's an older Chinese bodybuilder and actor. He was in Enter the Dragon with Bruce Lee. So Taibo was in a number of, I think that's the name of the art. That's not the name of the actor. The name of the actor slips me at the moment. But a very talented African-American martial artist, kickboxer, actor. And so he's got these videotapes for women. And these rooms are full of women. And they're having a great time when they're doing the step punch. And a lot of that is geared towards the aerobic workout. But those very exercises, where they're step on the thing, step, really should be converted to highly effective martial arts strikes, straight punches, and learning how to step in. And if you learn how to torque, and if you learn how to hit, and you learn the basics of circular motion, you're going to have a better chance, in my opinion, than trying to memorize something. Like, oh, okay, the hands are on my neck. What do I do now? Well, there's a number of things you can do. With your palms, especially, if the hands are outstretched, you want to bring those palms up from your side, striking their elbows on both sides, causing pain in the attacker, causing them to release. At that point, you want to run away or claw the eyes or strike and know where to strike, especially if they have a hold of you, like your hair. Of course, there's going to be situations out there that are just when you're dealing with a gang, an armed gang. And so the next part of our talk is about common sense, women's self-defense and common sense. If I was teaching a women's self-defense course, just like certain, taekwondo or kung fu martial arts schools may do a little bit of meditation before their class. Without fear-mongering, it's important to talk about what is happening in the world. We have seen a trend with more and more women going into prostitution and the sex industry and stripping. We've seen more men going to the military. You're not going to see a political martial arts school, and that wouldn't be exactly very kosher. But it's very important that people connect the dots with women's safety and what's going on with our country. What's going on with the job situation? What is going on with the social unrest? What is going on with the civil unrest? I won't talk about solar flares in this video, but I have done a lot of research into how human consciousness is affected by the solar flares, but it's not like light or dark. It boosts all energy. That includes sexual energy, that includes warlike behavior from men. And so in my other work, I talk about these cycles of war, even world wars. Sometimes staged, and sometimes there's just microcosmic wars in our own lives, in our relationships, at the workplace. We see the roid rage. We see humans affected in some cases. Those are times where I read about the most attacks on women. There's something going on spiritually There's something going on our planet on a larger level energetically. And so when you read about attacks on women, or women being demonized, or men being demonized for that matter, that's all a reflection of what's going on a larger picture. And so women's self-defense is more about the techniques. It includes picking the right partners. It includes being informed of what is taking place. When you have a situation where there's an economic collapse, you do see a rise in human trafficking. And women being assaulted and women being kidnapped, there's a connection with economic collapse. And there's a lot of women that are not educated in the history of the world of women and men in its entirety, and the slave trade, and the things that are still going on. And in particular, there's not enough education about some of the horrible things that U.S. troops have done to Middle Eastern women, and certainly not enough remorse. Now, with the situation, the coverage of the rapes in Europe, it is grossly exaggerated to demonize those Middle Eastern countries, because the current war that's taking place is about to erupt to something larger, encompassing not only Syria, but Iran, and it's going to lead to the World War III scenario, which I also talk about on this channel. If and when we're ever occupied by China and Russia, and I know this is a lot for a lot of people to handle, so take a deep breath and understand that sometimes the good deeds that you do on this planet are the very things that save your ass. So I don't want people to be in fear, but I want people to know that what we have in Europe is a exaggerated situation, and when you have people afraid all the time, especially of non-existent threats, eventually they become numb to it. So whether it be the ISIS thing or the rape thing, when you amplify an issue to a point, it can almost turn people off from even being aware. And I've seen this psychology. People just don't want to hear it. They want to turn off the news. They want to turn off the TV. But in doing so, it's good to turn off the TV, but you can get a lot of info on the internet. In shutting yourself off from all information sources, you can also shut yourself off from the real threats. And so women would be in a real dangerous situation if this country was to go without power for an extended period of time. If they were to go without cell phone service, if they're single, living in a city, and they're affected by the gender warfare game, and we're divided in a world without families, and people aren't really in deeply committed relationships with people that they love. We have a world where people are using each other and, in this gender warfare trap. That's all leading to an unsafe society for women. Now, women have been conditioned to venomously view some men in a certain light, especially those of us that are involved in, topics that I talk about on this channel. And that does hurt. And it does hurt to go, my own life, for that matter, trying to warn American women about what I believe is coming down the line, and to see a real, either a lack of appreciation, but, in general, because the nature of this channel is so controversial, it alienates a lot of female listeners. And so when it comes to women's safety and women's self-defense holistically, being aware of what's going on is really important, and not being in denial. When I was in Portland, I would talk about the headlines that were increasing about child sex trafficking. And before Portland was put on the map as the number 3 city for that, I was on Access TV warning Portlanders about their future. And I do believe that when and if we are occupied in a World War III scenario, that a lot of revenge on Americans would be taken out against women, because this historically is what is done. Whether it's Russia raping the German women in 1945, or whether it was the Japanese gang raping the Chinese women in Nanking in 1933. You see, the topic of rape is disturbing to a lot of women. So when you talk about these particular scenarios, a lot of people shut off. And they seem to gravitate more to, like, the lone wolf rapist. It could be any man threat. Or perhaps a white woman walking, somewhere in a city by a darker skinned male. He could look black or Arabic. Maybe something happened to her. Maybe it was media programming, or something that happened to somebody else that they put on the news, thus affecting her. And so women are already somewhat traumatized from all the fear-based propaganda that's always directed at the woman to be afraid. But now we have this exaggerated story coming out of Europe. And I'm concerned that there's going to be an increase in sexual assaults on Arabic or Middle Eastern women. There's already gangs in Germany that have been arrested for plotting to blow up a refugee camp. And you know what's really sad, for those of you who know about ISIS? According to what we've been told, a lot of women have been kidnapped or taken from those refugee centers. You know, whatever the situation, whatever the time, whatever the year, when you have refugee centers and women in war-torn situations, you have the enemy troops or even, bad people within their own society trafficking those women for profit or for greed. And an evil does get a hold of society. It does. And I think it has a hold of our society now. If it didn't, there'd be a lot of American women pissed about the Middle Eastern women raped over there. And their own trauma about their own rape culture wouldn't stop them from saying something. Now, as far as New Age bullshit and the channeled messages, I guess we'll go to psychic protection next. I'm not going to say who, but let's just say, I remember when this person, we were having a debate about some of these spiritual concepts. I've had people and this person basically convey to me their fear of saying anything about what's really going on, a fear of dark ETs, especially for women that have gotten involved in metaphysical materials, that have been told false information that the dark ETs have been removed from the planet and that certain channels are okay to work with. And so there's a certain amount of damage that's been done psychically to women that have gotten involved in the mainstream New Age movement in channeling. And the opposite of that, the core of psychic protection, is grounding. Grounding out that fear of something happening to you. Grounding out that pain, that trauma. We should be able to look at issues. Now, for those of you that know my background relating to my parents, I was born here in Oregon. My dad's from the Middle East. My mom is white. So as I'm seeing all this stuff, it's very threatening to me. And my last name does come from the Middle East. It's very threatening to me that things could turn out in a way to where they really start targeting people in this country that are different, even those that were born here. Even those people who have at least one parent who would be considered Caucasian or white. And so I have to overcome my own trauma to basically cover the news. Overcome that fear. It's hard because that fear is coming at a lot of people right now. There's a lot of people out there that have done nothing to this country on 9/11 that are either being murdered, raped, or they're afraid they're going to be killed soon. And there are people that have migrated here from some of those countries. And a lot of foreign people have come here that are traumatized. And they see the U.S. as, in a way, rescuing them from that horrible place, even if the U.S. is playing a role in destabilizing the place where they're from. So you have Stockholm Syndrome. So you have Stockholm Syndrome with a lot of people here, as well as Americans, American men, American women, those that would identify to be white. But I find these labels white, black. Should there be a yellow, red? It's very arbitrary, the way that we have labeled ourselves and the way that we are labeling others based on the amount of melatonin in their skin. So I really need to emphasize the fact that women should be educated about world events and not be so easily controlled by the media. They're setting the stage for a World War scenario, and by design, they're going to bring down the U.S. And from within, just like NORAD staying down on 9/11, they'll allow the Chinese and Russians. And they may decide to stop the war in a few years, come out as the saviors, have an agreement, have a new world order. But it will be brought out of the ashes of the chaos that they create and ferment. And so what you're seeing now with this manufactured racial tension thing is to weaken our country more, create more distrust. And so you have a lot of sad, single men and women out there that are good, decent people, but we're not in a healthy society where our environments are conducive to a healthy conversation. It's fear and it's terror. This was done to divide us. So we want to protect each other in a physical sense once our nation comes under siege. So I hope that you're with me. That women's self-defense in the future relates to being aware of what's going on. We see a rise also in the pornography culture, and there's far more female hardcore gangbang porno stars. I'm sorry, but I have to tell the truth. Than there are female YouTubers speaking any truth. In fact, I see a lot of women that are falling for the disinformation, the conspiracy disinformation to take away from the real stuff. And so women may be believed to have a natural intuitive nature, not when they're on the computer, they don't seem. Just to be frank with you. So I think that there's a lot of mind control and influence going on through the internet, through the cell phone, and other means to limit female intuition. And that's one of the worst things to happen to today's woman, to have her intuition removed, because that is her protection. At the core, it is the woman's intuition. I'm a good person, and I have seen women affected by the propaganda out there and the mind control to even distrust me. I have talked about dream invasions with my Archon podcast series. And a lot of women that I've dated in the past have had their dreams invaded and things implanted like, oh no, he's a cheater. His was like really like obscure plots. Like stuff off a script. Like a program spitting it out. And so yeah, there are things happening. Might want to check out Eve Lorgan and the Love Bite. The story of Dark Cupid. It's basically the idea that many humans are being misled when they feel this. In some cases, when people think that they're falling in love with someone, in reality that person could be the worst person for them, but their body feels good, and that person feels good while they're with them for a while. They may not realize that they're being drained, vampired on, or being affected by the other person's energy and what's going on with them. And so intuition is very important. And there is another video, Introduction to Basic Psychic Protection and Meditation, on this channel. And I talk about basic Vipassana meditation, observing your breath and becoming in tune with your breath and becoming aware of your body's senses and becoming in a state of peace and tranquility and equanimous nature, to where, you know, you're not scratching every few seconds. You're able to just observe your breath. This combined with deep breathing, deep breaths into your stomach, feeling that power, feeling your feminine and masculine, speaking to all the women and men listening, balancing your left and right brain, feeling that powerful energy field around your body, and bringing that energy field in, because we can really project our thoughts and our auras, our energy fields, even through the internet. Pull it back. And I talk about, you know, bringing in your energy, visualizing a gold sun, encompassing your own energy with a magnet in it, bringing your energy back and into your body. That sun at the top, above your body, above your crown chakra. And balancing and grounding and spinning those chakras, running your earth and cosmic energy, creating a grounding cord with your mind, connecting it to your root chakra, to the center of the earth, and of course blowing roses, creating roses. You can also imagine creating something else. You create it in front of you, and you take it with your spiritual arm, and you visualize taking that rose and cleaning out the gunk, the pictures you're stuck on, the trauma, the pain in your body, in your head, repeating the process and sweeping your body, ground, and then filling your body with more energy, running earth and cosmic energy all the while. This is the core of psychic protection, to clear out your inner sight so you can detect danger. And by grounding, you ground out that trauma of the things going on in this world, the things that are hurting you and traumatizing you. You ground and you ground. You know, it's like that old Zen saying about emptying your cup. And then you fill more. You're going to empty your cup. You're going to ground out your beautiful body. So you can absorb new information. You're going to ground out those pictures you're stuck on. You're going to ground out those implants. You're going to ground out those things that are holding you back from being what you are as you is, a powerful being. You have that ability inside of you. You've always had that ability inside you. You've always had the ability to defend yourself. You've always had the ability to think for yourself. You have the ability to live outside the city and live that self-sufficient lifestyle. You have the ability within you to develop that self-sufficient lifestyle with a man or a woman, whoever I'm speaking to, that is going to treat you with respect. It may take some work, though, for you to get to that point. It may take me some work to get to some of my goals, but I'm working on it, and part of me working on it is sharing my truth, and I'm doing that with you right now because I care. Now, in conclusion, I have seen a sharp increase in attacks on women across the board on this planet. It's like there is some sort of a rape energy there. I see it as more of an alien energy, a dark energy, than a human energy. It's more archonic than anything else. And this archonic energy that our planet seems to be swimming with, and I do think that there's a link with the solar flares and other things going on, as above, so below. Some people go off during these periods we're in of major energy transitions, and they almost seem to act like they're possessed by entities. And so, when I hear about mass rapes and I hear about some of these things, what I'm seeing is dark, negative energy that is amassing and it's targeting certain people. Now, I never blame the rape victim, but I believe that karma does play a somewhat of a role in some of the things that happen to us, and I do believe that we are return visitors, some of us, to the earth. So some people that may have been involved in injustice to others may come back to see what that's like. Not in all cases, but in some. And I see that in my own life. And I've also seen a lot of divine intervention and positive things happen to me throughout the course of my life, which I've talked about in my Life Series podcast. The Life Story podcast series, which I'm going to expand on. So there's a lot of different ways in which I could have been taken out of the game a long time ago. And for some reason, I wasn't. What I can look back and see when I made some mistakes as a 19-year-old and 20-year-old and 1-year-old, dabbled briefly with the substance problems, going through a lot of pain during that solar cycle and during that period of a lot of violence and unrest. So all these things tend to go together in waves, like an energy. And so I was medicating in my own way. And I can see ways in which those things that were unfortunate that happened to me, like, being arrested and going to jail, they were things that set my life in a new direction. It was not awesome to have that or the charge for possession of heroin, but there was intervention in my life that stopped me from hurting myself. Likewise, when I've done wrong to others, I've seen my karma return to me. So through my own life experience, I believe in karma. Also, looking at the rise and fall of civilizations, we do see cultures like the Roman Empire, societies, civilizations, rising and falling. And we see this period of tyranny, but also decadence within the society, within the men, within the women, how they treat each other. And so we're in a collapse paradigm period right now where healthy relationships are collapsing, and it goes along with the economic collapse, as we also see a war on off-the-grid living as the armies of the East rise. And there is this period in history, these periods in history where we can see not only what happens to countries when they're invaded by a foreign army, what happens to the women, but what happens to those countries that do those things. It's like a cycle of violence, inhumanity. And instead of thinking of yourself as just a man or a woman, think of yourself as a human. And we as humans in this world of duality, light, dark, night, day, male, female, we have this duality expressing itself, but don't get caught up in the division. There's still a oneness to the day, even though there's night and day. There's still a oneness to the energy that comes from the sun, whether it has a positive or negative outcome in your eyes or my eyes based on our perspective of what's good for us or them or whatever the situation. So we come out as male and female. And we're each responsible for the world that we created. It takes a male and a female to create a male sociopathic killer, as well as a female that has wickedness in her. So there's no point in blaming the sex. It's looking at what's happening with our species, with human consciousness, with men and women, the majority of them. And so in my opinion, women's safety and women's liberty and freedom, I mean, the women are giving birth to these babies. I mean, is that woman free to bring a child into this world to feel that for him to make a living or whatever, she has to basically co-sign the bullshit that he's defending our freedoms when he signs up for the military? You know, when that kid can't find a job and there's propaganda on the TV that is targeting the American people. The divine feminine with intuition protects the son, protects the brother, protects the husband. She's a healer. She's intuitive. She protects them and says, no, 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 this is evil. And you hear about these sex strikes. That's built in. That must be wired into us as a defense mechanism where women are like, okay, no more sex. This is too violent. And we've seen various successes, of course. The UN has warned against it. But where they go on sex strikes and they say no more sex for the men until you guys stop fighting. You know, that idea of choosing to no longer procreate or give any sexual energy or attention to the destroyer, that's revolutionary. And that's the revolution to come to female consciousness currently incarnated on the planet now. As long as we're in human form, male and female, we're going to have certain biological impulses to rape, pillage, and kill. And as immoral as we may see those things, society gravitates towards those destroyers. They seem as a better protector. We could see how the female psychology towards the bad boy, and we look at the global politics and the U.S. government and the U.S. military. We could look at Trump and make military great again. Then on the side of his mouth, he talks about he doesn't buy the whole story about 9/11. One day blames Bush, one day goes and talks about Clinton. It's a schizophrenic society where all this fear and all of this insanity is infecting people's thinking processes. So female intuition is also adversely affected by unnatural electromagnetic fields, smart meters, cell phones. The general grid that she lives in the big city, has literally raped her intuition. The third eye is not. I don't know how some of these people think that they're that clear, but a lot of them are not. And a lot of these major cities are hotbeds for groups where they channel, and I think they're hotbeds for archons that are, again, dabbling in people's personal affairs and also possessing people to go out and rape and kill. So we have a greater police state, and we're constantly in a world at war and in fear. No, we need less of a world where we're afraid of being raped or afraid of being feared as a rapist. We need more love. So a lot of people aren't going to hear my warnings, but some people are. Living off the grid or having wilderness survival skills is important for a female if she has to get out of Dodge. Because in some cases, there may be a scenario where there isn't a man around to help her or who wants to help her during that moment in time. She may not feel that she can trust those men that are in the neighborhood. Maybe they're burning a car, or that would be kind of a scary situation. Maybe they're raping a girl. You know, I think that we're going to see some of that in a occupied, bombed out America, public rapes. And so in that situation, you know, for those people that aren't with a decent protector, they're going to be in a bad situation. But I'm speaking about this before it happens. They also chose that. And people can confuse it with real independence It's not when the government is your protector. The cell phone, 911, that very thing, the cell phone replacing, this is the machine, this is transhumanism. What are you going to do if the power goes out? It's like that song from the Cars, who's going to drive you home? But for the woman, it's like, nope, nope, that's fine. You still need to be aware of what you're up against. There's far more advice that I can give than concealed carry or another weapon that can be taken away from her. But if she's going to conceal carry, she should know how to use it and not be afraid of it. Just like women should know how to box, basic boxing, basic step-in, striking, aerobic style. We're going to move it away, and it's not going to be dancey, but, be more of a move-in, step into it. There you go. You can do it. Go back and forth, work with a female. Okay, now deal with these basic strikes the way a real person trying to assault you would strike. Don't meet your brute strength, the brute strength with brute strength. Move around the punch. Counter, claw, and get away. Do whatever you can to get away. But stop that bastard if you can, and here's how. And practice these techniques over and over and over and over and over again. And meditate, ground, drink good water. Don't mess with antidepressants. If you are seriously addicted, like I've met some people that say that they'll die without them, that's not good thinking, period. That's a really bad sign. Yeah, you're going to have a lot of people coming off their meds during a collapse, aren't you? So for a lot of women, you need to be able to get out of Dodge. Getting involved in a mob situation, even if there's other women, it's going to turn into who's the alpha male real quick. I don't care if the people are vegans. Those people can turn to cannibals real quick if they don't get their food. I've seen a lot of, I warn about Portland because there's a lot of angry energy in Portland. A lot of divide and conquer energy. A lot of division. A lot of heartbreak. There's actually a lot of history of divorces there, as well as really bizarre sexual kinky behavior and rape and child sex trafficking. Drug addiction, homelessness epidemic, Jesus Christ, the Portland City Mafia. It's an energetic wasteland. And in an energetic wasteland where it's not really a conscious society, regardless of what your yoga session felt like, society is in a state of collapse, which means there are more people that are unhinged because we've been divided against each other, and nice guys do finish last still. That's just how it is. That is the state of the union of our affairs. Bullet point, talking point, speech right there, and just a few lines. If that wasn't the case, there wouldn't be so many decent men going off grid and so many sociopathic men staying in the system, playing the game, and doing whatever to impress the modern American woman so he can get laid. And that's what ties a lot of men to these grids and cities and apartments and all of that. Society, these people in these large urban cities, they're sitting ducks. And so you need to be able to know how to get out of the area you're in by foot, because in a lot of cases you're only going to be able to take a backpack. You may not be able to take your car. And so those are situations where being able to know how to use a knife and stab someone, to have it in you to pull the trigger if you're in danger, because in a collapse situation, you don't need to worry about the courts. You need to get out of there quickly because your life is on the line. So this impromptu podcast is now going to come to a close. Women's self-defense is a very important issue, but it doesn't just include physical training. It's knowing about the benefits of being out of a big city, off-the-grid living, self-sufficiency, having your own food, being able to be in an environment where you're at peace, taking time to meditate, to ground, to protect your psyche, to tap back into your divine feminine, your intuition, to understand karma, to do good deeds as insurance, because you want to be a good person. And I do think that the things that we do on this planet, they matter. And there's also certain women out there that I've known in the past that, I've been close to, and I don't think that they're going to have any trouble at all in the future. because they're good people. I can't guarantee it, but there's a few people out there that I feel in my heart are going to be okay. And there's a certain archetype of American female that's very mainstream today that I don't feel is going to be okay. And I don't want to see her in danger. I want to warn her. I want her to know that our country is going this direction. I don't need to go out with her. I don't have a special agenda. I feel that with the knowledge and feelings that I have, that I need to put out this information. But you need to know that I've been putting out this information for years, and it's not appreciated. And because of that, that only alarms me that much more about what people are not seeing, about not only what's coming, but what's already here. I'm Alex Hansery, coming to you from my RV in southern Colorado.
You can't go on thinking nothing's wrong. Who's gonna drive you home?